Hi, Paola. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Monica? It's lovely to see you.
It's lovely to see you. Latinx House friends, I am here with my friend, Paola Mendoza. I'm sure many of you know her. I'm sure you follow her work, and I'm just really happy that we're going to have a chance to talk today about some of what she's working on. Some really exciting upcoming events happening with Paola that we're going to learn more about. And first, I just want to check in. Paula, when I start these conversations, one of the first questions I usually ask people is just, how's your heart? There's a lot happening in the world right now. How's your heart?
There is a lot happening, that is for sure. My heart is strong. It is beating. I'm alive, so I'm grateful for that. My family is doing well.
Good.
And I get to be in community right now, so I'm actually in a really good place. And obviously ready to keep on working, as we both are always working, not for ourselves, but for our community.
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm happy that you're doing well and that your family's well. My family's doing well too.
How's your heart, Monica? I have to ask the same question. You can't ask such a deep question. I can't ask it back.
That's true. Well, my heart is full. My birthday was yesterday,
A
and
happy belated birthday.
thanks. And so it's just so, wonderful. I love my birthday because I feel like that's the time of year when I get to reconnect with so many people who I don't get to talk to all the time. And so I'm still on that high from getting to check in with folks, from like grade school friends and family and neighbors. And so my heart is full for sure.
Good. I'm glad. You deserve it. You deserve to be full.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that we had some tech difficulties. So people who are tuning in might be confused because we were going to do this as an Insta Live and now we switched it up because we're doing it as a video. But I live in rural Ohio and we cannot always rely on our broadband here. So wasn't able to make the Insta Live work on my phone, but we're doing this video and we're going to have a great conversation anyway. So folks who are
Yeah.
tuning in, sorry to switch up the format, but here we are.
It works. It works. We're all good.
It works. Okay, so I know you and your work and love you so much and your work and who you are in the world, but I feel like maybe some people who are tuning in might be meeting you for the first time. And one of the things that we have talked about since I've known you is, you come to the world as a creator, and you are a fighter, and you are an organizer, and so many titles can be attached to who you are and how you show up in the world. And I feel like one of the things that sometimes I hear people call you is an artivist. And so I just think it would be really great for you to tell us who you are and how you define the way that you're showing up in the work and in the world.
Thank you for all of those kind words. I identify first and foremost as an artist, and my work is obviously unapologetically political. I work at the intersection of art and politics, and what that means is the issues that I'm most attracted to within my art are issues around immigration, because I myself am an immigrant, and also feminism. And I organize as well, but it is not by any means my first calling or my first instinct. It is what I do when the time calls for it, and I enjoy it. But I first and foremost, by far, am an artist. So when people say I'm an artivist, I kind of chuckle and I kind of laugh. I think because my entire life, creative life, has been people trying to put me into a box to try and understand me and give me definitions. And I think artivist is also just part of that journey, because I am constantly, I started off many years ago as an actress, and then I started directing documentaries, and people were very confused. They were like, wait, you're an actress and you direct documentaries? How is that even possible? And then I started writing narrative fiction, and I wrote my first feature film, and I directed my first feature film, and they were like, wait, you're all of these things, you need to choose like this one thing. And I think in that vein, I went straight into filmmaking, and I was a director in filmmaking, and then I was one of the co-founders and the artistic director of the Women's March when Donald Trump was elected. And so then people again were like, wait, what is this thing that you are? You organize and you're an activist, but you're also an artist. So, we're going to put you into the box of an artivist because that's something that we can understand. And I'm totally fine with it. But it is not necessarily how I identify. I identify as an artist that is very political. And, there's this quote that I love that I read when I was in college, which was a long time ago. And
Not that
it
long.
really, it really defined my artistic career, unbeknownst to me until recently. And it's a quote by this playwright director named Brecht. He's German, and he was exiled from Germany in the early 30s by the Nazis. He lived in exile, I should say. And he was a radical and an incredible man, and really tried to shake up the foundations of the theater, and did so. But his quote is this, and it is, "Art is not a mirror with which to reflect reality, but rather a hammer with which to shape it." And that
That's
is really what
good.
I abide by. The art that I create is my hammer. Sometimes the hammer is really big, like with my book that's coming out September 1st, Sanctuary, and sometimes it's a little smaller, but always a hammer and not a mirror.
It's so good. Such a good quote. And also I love the way it describes you and your work. So you kind of alluded to this, but I want to go deeper. Your work in lots of ways is personal. And, and a lot of your work has focused, as you've mentioned, on immigration and the immigrant experience and on feminism. And so what brings you to the work, and sort of what has drawn you to continue doing this? I mean, I consider it, from my vantage point, looking at you and knowing your work, it's like, that's your vocation. It's like your life's calling. And so how did you get called into it, this work?
Um, I came to be an artist by accident, to be quite frank. I come from a community that didn't have a lot of resources, and I happened to come into a theater class my senior year of high school, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the idea to be able to express all of these things that were inside of me. I was a very angry, rambunctious, rebellious teenager, and didn't have a lot of outlets, right? I was like in a working class community with not a lot of support. And I found this outlet, and I fell in love, and I realized that this was what I wanted to do. And I had no artists around me. My mom was an immigrant. Like, I grew up in public housing on welfare. Like, the idea of to be an artist was not a luxury that was in our vocabulary growing up. And when I decided to be an artist and I told my mom, she was so mad at me. She didn't talk to me for 2 weeks, and she was like, "I didn't come to this country for you to be a starving artist. Like, what are you doing?" And as a child of an immigrant, we carry the we carry the burden of our parents' sacrifices. At least I do. I
Yeah.
carry it very, very much in my heart. And I'm very aware that my mom wasn't able to live out her dreams as a young woman, because she made a choice to come to this country and do what she needed to do for the betterment of my future, and I'm so grateful for that. But that is a big responsibility that I've carried my whole life, and even as an adult, and now my mom is in her 60s, like, I still hold that very close to me. So to go against my mother at that moment in time was a big deal. It
Hmm.
was a big deal, but it just
Yeah.
speaks to how clear I was about the importance of being an artist in my life. And now, of course, my mom is my biggest fan, and she's great and amazing, and she knows that there is no other path for me but this. But, you
So
know,
proud, I'm sure. She's so proud.
yeah, but I do feel like so often the children of immigrants, in many ways, we don't get to be our full selves because of this big responsibility that we have. And it's not new. We've seen it generation back and generation from generation to generation, but it's something that I talk about often because it affects us a lot.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I'm third generation, and it's a different experience, but but as the daughter of farm workers, when I told my parents that I was going to law school to serve farm workers, they were so confused because they thought, they were like, what do you mean? Like, you're supposed to make money. Like, they're so confused, you know? We had to deal with some of that too, but it was in a different context, so I get it. Um, okay, I want to talk about your art. And, you know, as you said, you're an actress and a filmmaker. I mean, so there's a, but you do so much different creative work, and it's always so, it's so innovative and striking. And, you know, whether it's, you know, setting up the incredible display that you set up in Washington DC, the children in cages, you know, in front of the Capitol, or the work that you've done to really bring to beauty and a clear picture of who immigrant women are in our country. You know, the I Am a Child exhibit that you helped create and curate. You know, so there's so many ways in which you're using your artistic eye and creativity. And I guess one of the questions I have for you is, how do you remain so nimble? Like, how do you stay so sharp that you can come up with these beautiful ideas that just really strike at people's hearts?
That's a great question. You know, when I decide to work on something, when I get an idea, and I get ideas all the time, I don't know, I have many, many ideas throughout a day. But it's when an idea doesn't leave me, when I can't ignore it, when it's like in my heart for a couple of days, and it's just this feeling that I feel that we artists understand. And I'm sure with yourself also, with an organizing moment, like there's a feeling that you get when you know that this is the thing that you need to do. And so that's what it is. And because I work in various mediums, you know, I no longer act. That is a medium that is out of my wheelhouse now. But because I work in various mediums, whether it's photography or film or literature writing, uh, when the idea comes, it also comes with how it's going to be presented. Is it going to be photography? Is it going to be film? Is it going to be narrative? Is it going to be documentary? Is it going to be a book? And that's important too. And
Mm-hmm.
I haven't yet had the experience where I'm unclear of the medium. Like the idea normally is very clear with the medium, but it is and I like the exploration of doing it in various ways. You know, as you were talking about the installation on the Washington D.C. Capitol, that was my first time that I did an art installation. It was this big, massive piece of art. And I really enjoyed it. And then, like, you know, now I feel like I can explore that and see what else comes out of it. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. And I think that for me personally, as I tell my students often when I was teaching more, like, it's okay to create bad art. Like, it just is. Sometimes we have to. It's not about, at the end of the day, as an artist, I feel that it's not about one piece of work. It's about the body of work that we create in our lifetimes. And that body of work will have masterpieces, and that body of work will have some shitty art. And it's all okay.
It's all okay. Yeah. And you know, one of the other things that I think is so important that, you know, so with the Latinx House, which is hosting this conversation, you know, I'm the co-founder of the Latinx House with Olga and Alex, and they send their love. They couldn't be here for this conversation. But, you know, for us, when we created the Latinx House, it was very much about bringing together artists as they are, filmmakers and activists and everyday people. You know, we're, you know, the Latinx House in some ways is very much an experiment of the coming together of different people who are experiencing much of the same things and figuring out how, you know, what can we do together that can result in some significant change. Essentially, that's, you know, part of the mission of our work. And I feel like you and your work embody so much of what it is that we're trying to accomplish through this organization. And so it would be helpful, I think, for people to hear, you know, how you made the decision that art in all the mediums in which you do your art could be a successful and important driver for social change.
Well, I think at the end of the day, we're all storytellers, whether it's a frontline activist as yourself, or whether it's an artist, what we're doing is telling stories to move people. And, you know, if we take the Dreamer movement as an example, it was individuals sharing their stories of how they came to this country, of what they lived through, of their sacrifices, the sacrifices that their parents made, that really ultimately changed the heart of most Americans. People
Hmm.
were like, oh, wow, I never knew that. I never thought about that. I didn't think that I knew anyone that was undocumented, but lo and behold, there so many people around me are undocumented, and and essential workers are undocumented. And it was in the telling of stories, along with obviously so much strategic policy work, and advocacy, that the heart of this country was able to change.
Hmm.
And myself as an artist, like, that is what I focus on as well. I want to change the narrative of the country that we are in right now, because I think specifically right now we are in a country that lacks compassion. We are in a country that has leadership that wants to hurt a large portion of this country. And I believe that it is in the power of telling stories that we can shift the culture around this idea and this ideology for the long run, for the long term, that then it will affect policy, and or policy first, culture second. I think the stronger way is culture first, policy second.
Hmm.
And that's, you know, it doesn't always work out so clean, right? And there's always back and forth. Progress isn't guaranteed. It's not circular. It
Hmm.
is definitely a line that goes forward and we come back with. But it happens with the telling of stories.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And okay, so let's talk about stories.
Yeah.
So you have been documenting the experiences of immigrants and migrants for a long time, but you know, your profile, and in particular your social media, kind of ballooned, you know, in the last couple of years because of your storytelling related to migrants in the caravan.
Hmm.
So tell us a little bit about that and how you decided to go on the caravan. And then I want to talk about your book, because I feel like, you know, this storytelling
Yeah.
related to the caravan in some ways in my mind kind of relates to the book, but I want to hear from you,
Yeah.
like, what took you there and what happened, and then let's talk about
Yeah.
the book.
You know, I would say that the last 4 years of my life have been in response in many ways to Donald Trump's horrible immigration policies. Not the life that I chose to live, but just the life that was given to me, to
Yeah,
us in this moment, for those of us that work in immigration.
yeah.
And one of those moments was 2018, right before the midterm elections. A caravan leaves from Honduras and is walking towards the northern border of the southern border of the United States. And the caravan started off with a couple hundred people and then quickly grew to 7,000 people walking. Donald Trump seized on this moment to say that they were coming to invade us, steal our jobs, filled with diseases, that it was terrorists, like all of the horrible negative tropes that you can imagine Trump was using.
Yeah.
This was very clearly his way in which to rally up his base, stir up the pot, because he didn't want to lose the midterms. The stories that I was reading on my Spanish language social media feed was the opposite of everything that was Trump was saying, but there really wasn't like a clear indication of that on English language media. We were kind of like falling in line with what Trump was talking about.
Yeah.
So I called up our dear friend, Jess Morales, and I was like, Jess, I want to go down to the caravan. And she is and was working with, and four families belong together. And at this point I had been working with Jess for a while, and she was like, okay, go do it. And I was like, I want to tell stories via social media. She was like, go do it. We'll support you. So I went down there, and I was in the southern part of Mexico with the caravan. And it was, I've seen a lot and have been a lot of places in my life. And as a documentary filmmaker, I've been in some pretty tough and crazy circumstances, but the caravan was one of the most chaotic experiences that I've ever experienced in my life. We landed in the middle of the caravan, and we were there for, I think the first trip was 7 days. documenting stories, telling the stories of women and children and families as to why they were coming and what they were living through. And to your point, Monica, that, I went down there with 14,000 followers on Instagram. I came back however many days later, 7 days, 10 days later, I don't remember, with 100,000. And that is because people wanted to hear the truth. It
Mm.
didn't have to do with what I was doing. Besides, the only thing that I was doing was telling truthful stories, and people were desperate for that
Yes.
and wanted compassionate stories, wanted to understand the circumstance that was happening. It was the first time that the caravan was happening on such a mass level. There had been caravans before, but it hadn't been on this level.
Right.
And people were desperate for information. And, I tried my best to make sure that these stories were that the foundation of them was filled with dignity and truth and honesty and love, and not necessarily just steeped in pain. There was a lot of pain on the caravan
Mhm.
for sure, but there was also, as humans are, people falling in love, life happening, children laughing and playing. So I tried to balance, excuse me, to balance that out. But as you are absolutely correct, the caravan 100% influenced my book Sanctuary, which is a
Yeah. Wait, wait,
fictionalized.
wait. I've got to show it. I got to show it.
Ah,
I
you're so
have it right
sweet.
here. I started reading. I'm so excited. Here,
Yay, you're the best.
here's Sanctuary. And
Yes.
before we go into this, I just want to say that your work with the migrant women and children and families in the caravan, it was beautiful and humanizing, and um it wasn't exploitative, because a lot of times, unfortunately, when people tell stories of immigrants, because they're trying to sort of, as you were saying earlier, we get people put people in boxes, and that happens also with these immigrant families, and you were showing who they were as humans. And so I just want to say I appreciate you so much for all the work you do. But I remember following along when you were on that journey, and it was just so beautifully done. So thank you.
Thank
Um, and now we have this new work of art, Sanctuary. And look, I have some prosecco here because I was going to
you.
toast you.
That's a red wine, girl. Salud.
Toasting to you and this new exciting piece of work that you've done. So Sanctuary is your book. It's coming out September 1st. You co-authored the book with Abby Sher, and it's for young adults. So why the book? Why now?
I really wanted, the book, the idea of the book, don't worry, Jesse, you can come through. Don't worry. The idea of the book, this is quarantine life, people coming in and out. The
Yep.
idea of the book came to me actually after Families Belong Together, the marches. It was around family separation, and I worked again with Families Belong Together to organize the marches across the country about against family separation. And I also individually worked with families who were separated. And those two experiences were very painful in their own way. Obviously, working with individual families, trying to reunite them with their children as a mother ripped my heart out. And the marches themselves, they were painful for what we were marching for, but they were also very inspiring, right? We had hundreds of thousands of people come out and march against family separation. And ultimately, we were able to stop that horrific policy in about 6 weeks, the way in which we knew it. Family separation with zero tolerance was stopped in about 6 weeks. And that was incredibly inspiring and hopeful. And so I took those two moments and I was like, okay, what would happen if we wouldn't have gone out to the streets? If this would have been like, if we would have allowed this to happen in this country, if we weren't able to stop it, what would happen? And I started imagining and creating this really, for lack of a better word, fucked up world
Mm.
where the darkest of horriblest aspects of the United States were actual reality. And that is the world, essentially, of Sanctuary. But then I also asked myself, well, what stops it? What is the hope in that world? And who and what that was the central character of our book, Valley. She's a 16-year-old undocumented girl who is forced to leave her home in the United States, because it takes place in 2032, I should say.
Mhm.
And so
Yep.
she lives in Maine, and the federal government starts rounding up undocumented immigrants in ways that they never have before, and everybody is chipped. Citizens are chipped, and so she has a fake chip. And California, for a whole host of reasons, secedes from the union and says undocumented immigrants are welcome here. So Valley and her family start traveling from Maine to California to try and find safety. And it is a story of their journey trying to get to safety sanctuary in California.
Mm.
And a lot of different things happen, but ultimately what we see is Valley becomes a freedom fighter, right?
Mm.
She is a young girl that is born from the flames of so many young women who hi boys, so many women who I've been organizing with, yourself included, and just so many incredible women who I've learned so much from.
But her name is also so significant,
It
Valley,
is.
like in lots of it. Like I love that you chose to write something, in the future for us to imagine, like, in some ways, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's like it's almost like a call to action. Like if we don't change things, this is what could be, right? And was that your intention?
Absolutely, 100%. That is why the world is placed in 2032, just far enough in the future where it actually is believable in our lifetimes, and where we can stop it from happening. Because I firmly believe, if Donald Trump is elected in 2020, the American experiment is over. The American experiment has had many flaws previous to this, for sure. But if he is reelected in 2020, the United States as we know it, democracy as we know it, is completely over. And I think that we will be very much in line with what I put out in the book.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Dusty, 1 second.
Of
Dusty,
course.
you're being too loud. Go in the other room, dude. Go.
This is Corona time,
I know.
and my little guy's probably gonna come in here too in any minute.
Exactly.
So, you know, the decision around sort of the age of the character seems significant too. Because we hear about organizers. I mean, historically in our country, some of the most important movements have been led by children,
Absolutely.
right? And so, tell us a little bit about how you made the decision around, the character and her age. You could have made her a 40-year-old activist.
Right. Well, I think that's exactly right what you said, Monica. It is around the world, the people that have made the most amount of change, that have been the most fearless, that have been the bravest, that have astounded the world, have been young people. John Lewis, 17 years old when he started, may he rest in peace. And so it is that example. And I believe that when we come out of this and the election and Joe Biden and Kamala win, I believe it will be young people that guide us through the healing process that inevitably we have to go through. As young people have in many ways guided us from the healing process of all of the racial inequalities and hurt and trauma of the past. So it is absolutely by design. And I also wanted to make sure that this book was an intergenerational experience. I
Mm-hmm.
want a young person to be able to read this book, and I also want an adult in their life to read this book and have this cross-generational conversation around the issues that are raised, because the book is not sugarcoating anything, right? Just like undocumented young people grow up way too fast because they're forced to. So very similar to that, Valley is 16 years old, but she's not living in the world of what we would consider a 16-year-old's regular life of being a teenager and thinking about boys or girls or, just
Yeah.
carefree. She is absolutely a teenager, but she is dealing with some very adult and serious issues.
And so, okay, we want everyone to buy the book. So tell people how to buy, where they can order the book from. Now it's like pre-ordering because it hasn't come out yet. So tell people where to find it.
So you can find it in my bio. So in Instagram, you can click on my bio, Paola Mendoza, and there's a link in the bio, but it's also in any bookstore, anywhere you buy books, the book is there. So you can order it, pre-order it. And this is my plea and my pitch to people. We believe, and Latinx House obviously believes, that representation matters,
Mm-hmm.
and that it is important, and that it changes things when we see ourselves reflected in stories, in leaders. Having Kamala Harris as our VP nominee, it inspires and changes and little girls and the possibility of what we're able to dream about. And so with this book, it's important to support, and not just this book, but just all Latinx and people of color artists, because if they don't do well, if this book doesn't do well, I don't get a second one
Mhm.
in this vein. And that's because we have a very limited space to fail.
Yeah.
And if we fail, then it's very hard to get that second chance. So I'm not guilting people into buying the book. I'm saying use your money to tell people what you want to see, what you want to continue to read about, watch, hear
Yeah.
about. Um,
Absolutely. And I will guilt people, because it's important to support Paula. It's important to support her book. It's important for us to make sure that if there are things that we want to see, well, we can do something about it.
yeah.
I mean, we complain sometimes about not being reflected, but there are people who are talented like Paula who are giving us exactly what we've been asking for. And we have to go out and buy the book and tell our friends to buy the book, tell our families to buy the book, tell our local libraries to buy the book,
Mm-hmm.
because we need to support the work. But the other thing is, this book is a call to action. And this book is giving us an opportunity to understand what could happen if we don't act. So, Paula, I want you to, in the remaining time that we have, like, what is for you, without giving away the book, what is one of the biggest things that you want people to take away from the experience of reading your book? What do you hope will come from it?
Valley becomes a freedom fighter, not because she wants to, but because she's forced to, because the circumstances in her life forced her to fight for herself and and ultimately her community. And I think that that's the most important lesson, that we all have the responsibility to fight for justice and fight for equity. We have the responsibility to take care of our own, yes, but even more, just as important, is to take care of our community, of our country, of strangers that we see in unjust situations. And I believe that anyone can do that. And that is the power of the story of Valley, that she is every woman, every child, and it is the only way that we survive this moment in time and the future.
Well, thank you for giving us this vision of what could be, and for giving us a charge of what to do. And for all of you who are watching and who've been learning and listening, you know what you need to do. And that is, you need to pre-order Sanctuary so that you can read Paula's book and so that you can be part of this community of change makers. And we're just all really lucky that Paula is one of the leading change makers who is sharing her vision, her creativity, and her art with all of us. So support Paula, support the book, and keep speaking out for what is right and what is just. This is our time to make change, and every single one of us needs to be part of that change making. So Paula, I'm going to give you the last word. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. And what is your final message that you want to leave with folks?
Um, I want to first thank you, and I want to tell you how much I love and adore you. And I'm always so inspired by the work that you do. And I mentioned this earlier in the conversation, but Valley is born from the fire of you. And so much of the work that so many women are doing, for the past 4 years, I have organized with women across this country on various issues, and I have organized probably with like a handful of men. It is always women leading the charge, and it is such an honor and such an inspiration that you are doing that and that you are leading, and we're so lucky for that. So thank you. And I just want to tell people that it is absolutely in your hands to give us the future that we need, that we deserve, and that we want. Voting is the most minimal thing that you can do. We expect it. We need it. So make sure that you're registered to vote, but let's also go beyond voting, and let's really find the issues that move us, that inspire us, that need us, and dig in and stay with it for the long haul, because change takes time. True change takes time. And we need all the hands that we can get in that change making time.
You heard it here. Paola Mendoza. Follow her at Paola Mendoza. You can go to the link in her bio to pre-order Sanctuary. It will be out on September 1st. Tell all of your friends and family. We love you so much, Paola. Thank you for everything.
I can't wait to hug you in real life.
I know. All right. Bye. Take good
Bye. I love
care.
you, Moni.
Love you
Cuídate.
too. Igualmente. Bye.